Thank you, everyone who's introducing yourself in the chat. That's awesome. Okay. So it looks like we are going on the live stream. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover tonight. I want to make sure we have a lot of opportunities to ask questions. I want to introduce some folks who are with me here tonight, or actually I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Dr. Wood, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Dr. Ellis and Ms. Burial.
Hi there, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Joe Wood. I'm Natomas Charter School's Executive Director. I'm also a middle school parent. I have a son over at PFAA.
Hello, I am Addie Ellis, Student Services Director. I am excited to see all of our students back when we have hybrid learning in January.
And hello, sorry, I got a bunch of people in the waiting room. I am Laura Burial. I am the Teaching and Learning Director. And I also am a parent of an NCS student. My daughter is now already in high school. So welcome. It's nice to see all your faces.
And hopefully at this point, you guys know me. I am Ms. Goldman, Amanda. I am the Academy Coordinator for Leading Edge. And for those of you just joining us, I'm going to remind everyone that tonight's meeting is being recorded. I'll probably say that a bunch of times, but it only records whoever is speaking. And so if you don't want to be recorded, you can put your things in the chat and you can keep your image off the screen. Similarly, we have a lot of folks that are introducing themselves in the chat. That's great. A good reminder for me of who everybody belongs to, and also like what grade levels we're looking at. So if you don't mind doing that, that would be great. As we're sort of bringing, so tonight's topic is really the transition back to campus. I think that's the only thing on everybody's mind right now, and that's really what we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, I'm actually going to steal a couple of slides from Dr. Wood that he shared with our staff last week, because, and I've shared these with our middle schoolers, our 8th graders and 6th graders so far. I'll share them with our 7th graders on Friday. But I'm going to wonder who, if anybody, has seen this movie and knows who these guys are. Can put it in the chat if you're familiar with these characters. Oh yeah, I got thumbs up from Farah. Awesome. So I recently got to watch this movie with my 4-year-old. It was the best thing ever. These are the emotions, the feelings from Inside Out, the Pixar movie. And so we've got joy and sadness and disgust and fear and anger. And what I've been saying to our students and to our staff, and I think all of you as adults know, that right now is a time when there are a lot of feelings, right? There are feelings about coming back to campus. There's feelings about what's going on in the world. There's feelings about COVID. There's feelings about elections. There's feelings about wildfires and, you know, winter. And I mean, there's so many feelings that sometimes it gets really hard to make thoughtful, logical decisions because we have so many feelings going on. And the other thing that I talk to our middle schoolers about is so if you can see my face, I've got my picture, I've got my hand, my fist. We've got two parts of our brain. We've got like the ancient part of our brain that controls our emotions and our basic functions. And then we've got like the top part of our brain that controls our kind of cognitive, deep, you know, higher level thinking. And sometimes when all these emotions are going crazy, that we kind of flip our lid. We can't connect to that top part of our brain. And so we have to unflip it and get our head back on straight so we can make decisions. And that's what tonight is really going to be about, trying to get you all the information that you need in order to make the decision about your student coming back to campus. This is a little exercise that I do with the students. And you're welcome to do it with us, and you can do it right now, or you can do it any old time this week. But I ask them to, wherever they're sitting, put their feet on the floor and make sure you can really feel your feet touching the floor. If you're sitting somewhere where you can, try to get your shoulders back and your shoulders up against a chair, really feel that chest being like open. You can take some deep breaths, put your hands on your belly, and just take a couple slow, deep breaths. And again, you can do this or not, but the idea here is this is how we take what sometimes feels like to our body and to our nervous system that there's a bear chasing us and there's our bear roaring, and try to turn it into a little teddy bear, a little cute teddy bear. Try to convince our bodies that there's not a crisis, we're okay, we can think, we can make logical decisions. And I just encourage this of our students, and our staff, and I'll give you guys that resource, because right now it is tough to make all the decisions that we're having to make. I'm going to share with you guys a lot tonight that I have recently made these same sets of decisions with my own child, and I know that it's really difficult. So lots of information is going to come out tonight, and if it feels overwhelming, jump on in and take some deep breaths. So hope that is a helpful tool for you. Okay, so again, as people have entered, thank you so much for introducing yourself in the chat. And again, reminder that we are recording. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So some updates. We are wrapping up trimester 1 right now. Friday is the last day of the trimester. And as you know, we're preparing for a slow return to campus sometime between, with the goal being everybody who wants to be on campus back on campus in January. We have minimum days this week for conferences. Some of you have emailed me, does everyone have a conference? No, not because of the virtual nature of conferences this week. We're really focusing on the highest need students. So thank you for your patience on that. Next week, we have high school info night on the 10th, and 8th grade parents, I'll be emailing you about that specifically. Probably tomorrow, I'll get that email out. 6th and 7th grade parents, you're also welcome. I'll put information in my weekly updates. Next Wednesday, a week from today, is Veterans Day. There's no school, so just a reminder to that. And as I said, the end of the trimester is this Friday, so report cards will get mailed kind of middle of next week. So just some dates and upcoming events for you guys. But that is not why you're here, I know. So let's talk about our transition back to campus. And again, I stole some slides from Dr. Wood. So you might recall that back, I don't know, May at some point when we were planning for this school year, we talked about planning for sort of a flexible year, that at some points we would be in distance learning, and some points we might be in hybrid learning. At some points we might be able to all come back to campus. Right now we're in this middle stage 2.5 where most of our students are doing distance learning, but we have some that are coming onto campus, a very small number, to get a little bit of in-person support. And by January, we're going to be moving into this, stage 2, which is hybrid learning. Probably we're going to be in this stage 2 for the rest of the school year. Our best information from Sacramento County Public Health is that we should anticipate being in hybrid learning at least through the end of this school year. So we probably won't get to stage 1 this year. Maybe, but probably not. And so knowing this, you kind of have a sense of what we're planning for and what we're working on. Also, if you joined us last time we met, we talked about that about 2 weeks ago, our board voted based on Sacramento Public Health conditions. Our board voted to approve our students coming back in a hybrid mode January 4th, so when we come back from winter break. And so that's why we're right now in that planning mode and moving in that direction. Any of my fellow Dr. Ellis, Dr. Wood, Ms. Barry, you guys can interrupt me at any time, by the way. So what does that mean, and how did we get here, and where do we go from here is probably what everybody's thinking right now. So how did we even arrive at this decision to transition to hybrid? Because I know that's a question some of you had. Why can't we just stay in distance learning forever? Well, maybe you can, but how did that happen? So from the county perspective, that happened because the county hit certain thresholds in our public health numbers for a certain period of time that allowed us to consider opening for hybrid instruction. And I am not going to go into the details of these numbers because I do not understand them that well. I just know that because we got some red and some orange, we're good. And as long as we don't go back to purple, that's a good thing. We can talk more in detail about that if you like. But so we looked at that. We also recognize that as a public school with state funding that is a site-based program, we're actually required to offer in-person instruction when we can. That's kind of what our school is based on. So knowing that the county is allowing us to do so and that we are required by the state to do so, the next thing we did was we got some feedback from you all. That happened last month, and we had a pretty good response rate. We asked questions of our students, of our staff, and our parents across all of our site-based academies, and we got some good information that helped us inform the decisions that we're going to talk about today. Daniel asks, does hybrid mean kids will be in the classroom but the teachers will not? No, Daniel, the teachers will definitely be in the classrooms, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, but it's a good question. So as we are planning, we're really always thinking about three things right now. We're thinking about safety. We're going to talk a lot about safety tonight. We're thinking about consistency and stability. How do we make sure that this year that is full of transitions is still as stable and consistent as possible? How do we make sure that the learning is the consistent part among everything else? And that's a big part of what we're talking about. I'm going to talk about safety first, and then I'm going to talk about that consistency and stability piece second. So what's our plans for safety? And this is where we're going to give a shout out to Dr. Ellis, who has been working in a lot of detail on these plans. And I am not going to go over every single detail of these plans tonight because I promise you all don't really want me to do that. Again, I'm going to put the link to the slide deck in the chat so you can always look at them. Plus, they'll be posted on our website. But just to give you a very broad overview of some of the safety precautions that we have in place when we come to campus. Everything we're planning is based on guidelines from Sacramento County Public Health. They update us regularly, and they update those guidelines regularly. Folks on this call get to talk to them about once a week to really make sure that we're up to date and following all the protocols. And so all these things you see here are the things that Sacramento County Public Health has recommended. So 6-foot physical distancing, making like movement patterns so kids aren't running into each other, masks required for everybody on the Black Rock campus, hand washing stations, hand sanitizer, cohorting our kids, and that we've kind of already done that. Daily cleaning and disinfection, making sure that you're screening your kids at home to make sure that if they're sick, they're not coming to campus. Lots of other details with lots of restricted activities. In addition, we've put air filters in all of our HVAC systems. We've changed up our classrooms to keep things 6 feet apart. Again, lots and lots of things going on here. And what I would love for you guys to do is just sort of take a moment and take a look at that. And I'll go into detail on anything that anybody has questions about. But really what I want you to take away is that we'll take care of the details. You just need to know that we have a plan, and it's based on public health guidelines and based on science. And I lost my little clicker. There it is. Okay. In addition, we're working with public health to talk about when kids stay home, when they're sick, when they're sent home, when kids are asked to quarantine. And again, there's a lot of information on this slide. What I want you to take away from it is that we have a plan for all these different scenarios. And one of the great things about having been on distance learning for the last, where are we at? 3 months? 3 months, more or less, is that at any time that we have to quarantine a group of students or have to ask students to stay home because they're sick, they will always have access to distance learning. And at this point, they know how to do that. So that's actually a pretty comforting reality. We've also gone deeper and have really been working on like, what does safety look like specifically on this campus? We've practiced with all the teachers. How are we having kids line up? How are we having them move through the classrooms? How are we staggering PFAA and leading edge so we're not interacting, like not overlapping? And so we've really looked at a lot of those things. And if just a few slides, I'll share with you some pictures of what it looks like. And I'm going to be sharing all this with your students and planning that with them. Let's see. Yeah, so the question in the chat is, can we expand on limited sharing materials? So what that might mean is, like, let's say in expressions class, if usually Miss Novello might have like 5 X-Acto knives that all the kids are using. We're gonna get more so that they're not sharing as much. If we need things that we can't get, we will definitely reach out to you all and see if you can help us get them. But certainly we won't require you to get them. It'll just be like, hey, can you help us with this? Nope, no problem. All right, we're gonna buy those things. But like, whereas maybe we used to have like one big bin of markers, now there's gonna be like smaller bins of markers, and we can spray them down in between class periods, that sort of thing. Chris, did that answer your question? Thank you. Awesome. Dr. Ellis, anything on those 3 slides that you would like me to expand on, or that you would want to expand on?
No, I think you were clear. And if there are any questions, you can always email Ms. Goldman or I.
So here's some pictures of our teachers in their classrooms. Some of you might know these folks. We got Ms. Babayev, Ms. Novello, and Ms. Neary. And you can see that the classrooms look all spread out and very sparse. All of the extra desks and extra chairs and extra tables and couches and all the fun stuff is not there. And we have individual desks for all the students. There's a max, I think, of 16 desks in each room, and they're all physically spaced out. And so you can see there's actually quite a bit of room. We've had a couple of staff meetings this week where we had our whole staff in the room, and it feels very open compared to the 30 kids that are usually in a room. So just an example of what that looks like. And I think I had one more slide on this. And this was just an image that I really liked. It's from a blog that I follow called Dear Pandemic. And it's these 2 very awesome, very nerdy women scientists. And so I like that for lots of reasons, maybe because I'm a nerdy woman scientist. But they talk about kind of all the things that are involved in staying safe. And this is really, I think, a great way to think about how we're thinking about safety. It's not that we're putting all the kids in bubbles and they're never going to interact with one another, but we're really trying to keep these basic principles in mind. Having space, having masks, keeping the rooms ventilated, being outside when we can, keeping small groups, and you know, the lot. The time is the one that's a little bit different. They're going to be at school for a full school day, but generally hitting most of those markers. Do we have any questions about safety specifically before I get into instruction? And again, you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute and say hi. You know, it's always scary to do that.
Hi, Goldman. This is Giridhar, Srishan's father. Yeah, actually, everything looks good. Only from my point, it actually she is having. So he will bite his nails. Actually, that is my concern. So if he's come to school, he's touching here and there, and if he bites his nails, it is not good, right?
So, you know, that's a great example of one of the things that I'm going to ask you at the end is really about how do we set up our kids for success. And part of it is practicing. So if they're wearing masks, it's going to be hard to put your hands in your mouth, right? And that's the kind of thing we would remind and prompt, but it's also something that's really, really important to practice, right? Having kids practice wearing masks. And if, you know, right now you're thinking about, you know, your child coming back to campus, but they haven't ever been to the grocery store, or they haven't ever spent more than, 15 minutes wearing a mask, I'm going to suggest that that's a step that you guys are going to want to take, in the next couple of weeks, because getting them ready and getting them used to these things is pretty important. So it's a good question. In the chat, Maria said that Roseville's not doing a lunch period. I can't speak to what Roseville's doing, but we're definitely going to have a lunch period for our kiddos because I think they will lose their minds, and we probably will too. So what that's gonna look like is, so when you think about cohorts at Leading Edge, or how small of groups kids are gonna be with, I want you to think about a grade level and about half of a grade level, because about half the kids are on campus on one day, half the kids on campus on another day. And so maybe that's a max of about 40, but there's, they're also not in one classroom, but of half a grade level. And they're gonna have big outside spaces to eat in. So like all the sixth graders would be in the amphitheater, which if you've seen that area, it's a really big space. All the seventh graders might be in another area. And so we definitely want them to have lunch and take a break and connect with one another, because that's part of the benefit of coming back to school.
The other piece I'll add to, just because I am actually very familiar with Roseville's schedule, they actually are doing half days. So kids are not coming for the full day. I think they're actually having kids on campus, I want to say 8:30 to 1:30, and then they're sending the kids home with lunch. So what they did is they built in 2 10-minute nutrition breaks. But I taught middle school for a long time, and I know our 12 and 13-year-olds get a little hangry before 1:30. So it seems like it might be a scary plan, but we're definitely going to keep an eye on it and see if there's anything that we can learn from them since they started school today.
Yeah. Eric asked, how are we handling mask enforcement? So I think there's two ways to think about this. What's intentional, like I refuse to wear my mask, and what is, I'm a 12-year-old and I need to be reminded a lot. We're definitely going to do the you're a 12-year-old, you need to be reminded a lot. What's interesting is that we've had students on campus, in small groups the last couple of weeks, and they are all excellent mask wearers. They're actually better than most adults. And so that's been really positive. That being said, of course, there's always going to be that special child who is having trouble with mask wearing, and we are going to enforce it. And if that is your special child, you and I might be having a conversation about, well, what can we do about this? Because they cannot be on campus without a mask on, or some sort of face covering as determined by, like, acceptable by public health guidelines. And this is going to be a hard point. Dr. Ellis, looks like you wanted to add.
If I can just reiterate, that's the importance of you all as parents practicing with them and helping them learn the importance of wearing the face covering, and that it's a part of being at school. And yes, they're middle schoolers, and so middle schoolers are always going to push the limits, because developmentally, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. So I know that our student services team is working on some information that will go out to parents in December on strategies for helping your kiddo reintegrate back into school.
I would add, I have some 8th grade helpers right now that have been on campus this week who are also like planning some training for the kids, some videos and some fun games that we're going to do, because I think the peer pressure in this case can be a very positive asset. So I'm hopeful that that will be helpful. All right, I'm going to keep going. If more questions come up, I will definitely answer them, but maybe hold them until our next question break so I don't get all like, which way am I looking? So the other part of this was we talked about safety. The other part of this was consistency and stability, and particularly consistency and stability of learning, because distance learning was brand new. No one had really ever done it before, but there were some models out there. Hybrid learning is even newer, if that's a word. And so we are definitely figuring out what that's going to look like. So here's the path forward that I shared with the students this week. And right now it's maybe a little bit more of a dirt path as we're still fleshing it out. But, our hope is, by the time we hit January, it's a nice smooth road, maybe with a few twists and turns, but we're getting there. And so here's the path. The path is that right now it's November. We're going to ask you guys to make a choice. You're already aware of that. We'll talk a little bit about that in detail. In December, we're going to start to train and practice campus procedures with our students, really to make sure that they are ready to learn in this format. And then in January, hybrid instruction begins. So let's start with the making a choice part. There we go. So many of you have already seen this email. It went out yesterday, today. It's going to keep bugging you until you fill it out. And I'm going to keep bugging you too. And this is one of those times where you're just going to go, oh yeah, Miss Goldman's annoying. That's okay. We still love her because it's what it is. That's going to have to keep bugging you. So emails are going out this week. You basically have two choices that you're making. The first choice is to have your student return to campus for hybrid instruction in January, or to remain on distance learning at least through trimester 2, potentially through the end of the year. I say that because Leading Edge is one of 3 site-based academies at Natomas Charter School. STAR and PFAA are on the semester system, so they will have to make this choice for the rest of the year to be consistent with their semesters. We have a little bit more flexibility because of our trimesters, but honestly, I just don't yet know what that's going to look like. So what I've been saying to people is make your decision assuming that it might be for the rest of the year. And if in March we have the option to make some changes, we'll be very happy about it. Does that make sense? If you are choosing to remain on distance learning, great, you're done, no more choices to make. If you are choosing to return to campus, you are going to tell us if you would prefer a shift with Monday and Tuesday at school, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at home. B shift where you're at school Thursday and Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at home. Or either shift, you don't really care, just put you somewhere. And I'm gonna beg you that if it's possible to please pick the either shift option, because if everyone picks shift A, I'm going to disappoint half of you. That's just the reality. There's no way for us all to fit at the same time. So if you have flexibility, I beg that you let us know that you have that flexibility. Also in that survey, it's going to ask you to tell us if you have a sibling at another academy, and so that we can try to keep you all together. I want to emphasize that this is a preference. It's not 100% for sure, because I'm going to do my best to get everybody what they need. But ultimately, we do have a capacity for how many kids can be on campus at a certain time. Questions about this choice? Oh, actually, yes, there are. There's probably some frequently asked questions. I've done too many presentations today. So a couple questions that people have already asked me. If I choose in-person learning, can I go back to distance learning? Yes, at any point, if you are here in person and you're like, I'm not feeling safe, I want to go back to distance learning, that's fine. But the other way doesn't work so well. So question 2, if I choose distance learning, can I change my mind and come in person? Probably not, at least not until the end of that trimester, because once we build these cohorts, they become sort of stable groups of students, and we can't necessarily move people around to accommodate coming and going. Obviously, like things come up, there might be some unique situations, but again, I'm asking that if you're choosing distance learning, you assume that it's at least through the end of the trimester.
Which is what?
Hi, my name is Vipul. I'm Tanaya's father. So I understand the concern. It can work one way, not the other way. And I think the main situation that can even come up in the other way is if the workplaces come back and say that we're going to start having staff coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something factored into your programming? So
if I understand the question correctly, is if your work situation changes dramatically, will we be able to accommodate? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with maybe. And I know that's not a great answer. It's going to really depend on what our numbers look like. So if, let's say I can have a max of 15 kids in a classroom, and I have that max of 15 kids in the classroom, and you come to me and say, okay, but I really want to come back on Mondays and Tuesdays. I'm gonna say I already have my max number. I can't go over that number. Now, if there is flexibility, I certainly will do my best to work with people, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that on our end. So again, what I would say is do your best to make the decision that you think will hold you at least through the end of February. If something comes up, always get in touch and we'll see what we can do. But I don't really want to make any promises at this point.
Oh,
Dr. Wood, would you say it differently?
No, I would agree. I mean, we definitely have thought about that and considered it. The problem is that every employer is doing something a little bit differently. So, like Ms. Goldman said, I would select the thing that, at least from what you know today, is going to be the most optimal. And, if you find yourself in a crisis situation, as we have in every year past, our goal is always to help families and reach out, and we can see what flexibility we have at that moment in time.
Right. So am I understanding that you guys are planning the hybrid model with the max capacity? You're not leaving any buffer in it at all?
Yes, because what we're trying to do is look for opportunities to have some of our highest need students potentially come to campus more often, such as our special education students. So kind of building with that idea in mind.
Okay, thank you.
The other piece too that I thought you were going to ask, but I'll just say it in case you are, is, at least what we're being told by Sacramento County Health right now is to plan for hybrid for the remainder of the school year. The public health department is not expecting to change like the 6-foot physical distancing or the mask wearing or that sort of thing until there's a readily available and used vaccine or treatment. And so when I last talked to the public health doctor, she said, I really would advise you to advise your parents to plan for this for the remainder of the school year. Hopefully we're all wrong and there'll be, some big change in March that we can do, but, just to plan with that mindset.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's a good one. Other frequently asked questions: if public health conditions changed, will our plans change? And the answer is, yeah. I mean, we have said from the beginning of this insanity back in March that the public health folks are the public health experts. We are not the public health experts. We're going to follow their guidance. That being said, their guidance to us has been that they think that it is more likely that they would quarantine or close small groups or small cohorts of students rather than the whole school again. But, again, everything changes all the time. But yes, we will always follow public health guidance. Will you take into account my student siblings? We're going to do everything we can to accommodate for your student siblings, especially if they're also at an NCS school. What I've heard from a lot of you is, my child is at a non-NCS school. I don't know what their plans are yet. And neither do I. But we do know that Natomas Unified reached an agreement with their bargaining unit earlier this week. So you should expect to see something from those schools soon. And from what we can tell, it is actually pretty similar in terms of days and such. So if you are looking to know what your other child's school is doing, I would encourage you to reach out to those schools. They might actually have some answers for you this week, where a few days ago they probably did not. And then the last question that I've already gotten a couple times is, what time will school start and end? Will there be before and after school supervision? So students are going to be able to arrive in the 7:45 to 8:15 window. School will start at 8:15. The school day will end at 2:10, and students are going to be need to be picked up or leave campus by 2:30. At this time, we're not going to have any sort of aftercare. There will probably be some sports that happen after school, but that will be kind of a limited amount. And while we would love to say that we can offer a lot of before and after care options, at this point, we don't have those. Dr. Ellis, I'm sure, would say that it's the thing that's keeping her up at night, and she's definitely trying to figure it out. But like many things, we're sort of taking it one day at a time. Okay, so now, are there any questions specifically on the making the decision part? I'm about to get to the how are we going to learn part, which I know is what most of you are probably waiting for.
Hi, this is Vipul again. I see you covered the fact that if in case there's a student that falls sick, there is a small cohort or a small quantity of people that might have to quarantine themselves. Is there any protocol right now that if there's a certain percentage of the kids get sick, then the whole school has to shut down?
There is. Dr. Ellis, do you want to talk about that, or I'm going to let you talk about that one?
So any decision to close the school down will be done in conjunction with Sacramento County Public Health. So whenever there's a positive case, either myself or Dr. Wood, we call public health and we go through a contact tracing protocol with them. So yes, there is it's a number of positive cases as well as the percentage of the total cohort that predicts the closing of school. The reason why I'm not saying the number is because that is subject to change based on public health guidelines. So just know it's not a decision that we make, but it's made with Natomas Charter School in partnership with Sacramento County Public Health.
So knowing the fact that the contact tracing is running about 2 to 3 months behind right now in the Sacramento County and is not that effective, has the board made any kind of internal decisions on the percentage of kids getting sick and making decisions that that's the guidelines that we want to create for our kids or not?
So I'll let Dr. Wood jump in as well, because I see that he was unmuting. So with any type of closure of the school, they have it's called the schools unit, the Sacramento County Public Health has, and the schools unit works with us. So I can't speak to what's happening in other areas within the county. I can speak to the information that we've been given from Sacramento County Public Health. And with any time that we've called them, they have been responsive in providing us assistance. So Dr. Wood, you were going to jump in?
Yeah, so the pieces I was just going to add is, so Sacramento County Public Health has actually created a separate unit, the schools unit, specifically worked with K-12 schools. And as part of that, they've actually been training our staff, Dr. Ellis being one of them, to do contact tracing. So we actually will be doing our own school level contact tracing. We won't be doing contact tracing external to the school. But, if my son, for instance, were to be positive for COVID-19, basically we would be working with the school to figure out who's he sitting with in classrooms and who else needs to quarantine. And so what we're looking at, I know Dr. Ellis was a little hesitant to give you numbers, but I'll give you some rough numbers that they've kind of shared with us, which is that really the whole school is not going to close until probably about anywhere from 5 to 25% of the students are testing positive. And there's that broad range because it's also partially indicative of what's happening in the community at large. Schools, when we look at states where we see significant increases in COVID-19 transmission, what we are noticing is it's not actually happening very much at schools. It's much more out in the community. And so what public health is trying to balance is their goal is actually to keep schools open, as long as it's safe to do so. So they're kind of always looking for this balance of, what's the risk versus benefit of keeping the schools open. And, as Dr. Ellis said, really anytime we have a positive case on campus, we immediately contact public health and talk through the case and figure out next steps. Based on what we're seeing in Placer and Orange County school districts that have already opened ahead of us, I don't think we're going to see a ton of cases on campus. I think we're going to see 1 or 2 here or there that are coming from activities that are external to the school. So, a family has a mixed barbecue gathering on the weekend and someone was positive there and someone else ends up positive. That may result in us sending groups of students home as a precautionary measure. But in terms of actually having numbers of students that are positive on campus, I don't think it's going to be a whole lot. And just so that, as a parent, if this might comfort you a little bit, we're actually working on a public dashboard that we'll have on our website that will weekly report out, any positive staff member cases or student cases, along with the number of students who may have had to quarantine that particular week. Certainly, if your child's a member of that cohort, like it was a student or a staff member that's in one of their classes, you're also going to get a formal notification via email and automated phone calls. But we want to make sure that, everyone's aware of, how many cases have they really had on campus or not had on campus, and, how many students are there versus how many students are quarantining.
And if I can add one last part, Dr. Wood had alluded to the number of teachers who are positive. Our staff are actually doing surveillance testing. So we have different cohorts of staff members who go bi-weekly, every 3 weeks. A different cohort goes to be tested for surveillance testing. That way we have a solid idea of any type of exposure that's on our campus.
I see in the chat, Katie asked about a recommendation or requirement for asymptomatic students to be COVID tested. So there's not a requirement, but what will happen is that anytime a student is demonstrating some sort of symptoms, or they've been exposed to a known positive case, let's say their parent tested positive or something like that, they actually have to, there's a quarantine process that they have to go through where they're going to go home for 10 to 14 days. And as part of that going home process, we ask that they contact their medical provider, and the medical provider then makes the assessment on whether or not they feel it's appropriate for the individual to get a COVID-19 test.
Excellent. I'm going to keep going because there's a few things that I want to get to, and then we'll keep taking questions. So I mentioned that was step one, we're making a decision. Step two is working with students to figure out how to return to campus in a safe, respectful, and responsible way. I'm just going to tell you right now that that's going to happen, and I'm going to tell you not to worry about it too much because I want to get to the meat of this conversation. Then we get to the point where we're actually doing hybrid instruction. And I think that this is that thing that we don't understand so well right now. None of us do because we've never done it before. But I have some basics to go over. So hybrid instruction will begin when we get back from winter break. One group of students will attend in person on Mondays and Tuesdays while learning from home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Super important to remind your children, just because they're not at school all those days, they are still learning all those days. One group of students will attend Thursday and Friday and learn from home Wednesday, Monday, and Tuesday. I don't know why I put those days out of order. And one group of students will choose to remain on distance learning and learn from home every day. Regardless of which group of students you are, there's going to be some things that are true no matter what. Number one, at home or at school, safe, responsible, and respectful learning is the expectation. By the way, this exact slide I went over with your kiddos today. Earlier in the year, summer, I don't know when it was, our governor said this quote, and I've stolen it from him because I like it. Learning is non-negotiable, and so is safety. So whichever one of those options we are choosing, we're going to make sure that both of those things, learning and safety, are both happening. Just like when we started distance learning, it's gonna be messy at first, and we're all gonna take a breath, put our feet on the floor, and recognize that that's the case. There's gonna be an adjustment period. There's gonna be figuring it out, and I will remind you that, especially, I know some folks on this call, the first couple of weeks of distance learning were really, really messy, and then they got easier. And while it's still not perfect, they definitely are much easier than they were at the beginning of the trimester. So we're going to be patient, we're going to be flexible, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to be brave. No matter which group you're in, everyone learns the same material. It just might be in a different format or a different order, and that's very common. I'll have some examples for you in a second. And this is also pretty critical because the kiddos are really worried about this. Everyone is still going to have access to their same teachers. We will be adding some more staff, these distance learning facilitators, to support learning, but none of their teachers are going away. So they're just going to be kind of sharing them with another one or two adults to sort of make sure that everybody's getting the support they need. But the teacher will still be their teacher, and the teachers they're seeing now will still be their teachers. That is a little bit different than if some of you I know have Star Academy students as well. Elementary and middle are different. We have different realities. But I know that today a bunch of our kiddos who have younger siblings at Star were very worried about this and were emailing me and were asking questions. So rest assured, Miss Mindel is not going away. Miss Novello is not going away. Mr. Shane is not going away. They're all going to be there. What I asked the teachers to do today is to provide some examples of what this might look like. And I have a bunch of them. We're not going to go through all of them because we'd be here for a while. But I'm just going to share some examples so you can start to get an idea. The teachers really wanted you to know that their intention is to provide support for all kids, no matter if they're at home or at school. But it's going to look very different. So here was an example from our humanities teachers. 7th and 8th grade. So they were talking about, like, if you're at home, you might be doing like a direct instruction lesson with the teacher, and then that would flip-flop when you're at home. I said that backwards. When you're at home, you might be doing some sort of self-paced instruction for 20 minutes and then flip-flop while the students at school do that same self-paced instruction, and then the teacher comes and works with you. So it might like flip-flop between some time between the teacher and maybe that distance learning facilitator. Another example from the 6th grade, they were talking about like the format might look different. So maybe there's a discussion going on, and if you're in class, you're actually talking to each other in person. But if you're at home, you might be talking to each other in your breakout rooms on Zoom. Again, there's lots more on here. You feel free to look at it later. And again, I'll put this in the chat just in case anybody wants to follow along in the slides. From our science and tech team, they were talking about how maybe when you're at home, you might be working on the lesson with access to a recording of the teacher, while when you're at school, you might be working on the same lessons, but with immediate access to the teacher. And then if you're at home, you would have that distance learning facilitator available to help you. Again, these are all just examples. And then the other two areas that we see a lot of what should we expect of sports and PE. So, Mr. Shane will not let your children go unexercised. Very important to him. So we will have PE on campus. We're not going to have them change out in the locker rooms. So please prepare to do some laundry or have them do the laundry because they are middle schoolers. PE will sometimes be in the gym, sometimes in the blacktop, and sometimes in the field. So if it's inside, it's in a very big space. Masks, they will wear masks most of the time when they're in PE, but if they're like doing heavy physical exertion and they're outside, they will be able to take their masks off, but they will be spaced out and not next to each other. Limited use of equipment, mostly looking at fitness and not non-equipment intensive activities. We do plan to have sports. This is leading edge. Some of our kids would not come to school if it weren't for sports. We know that. It will most likely be intramural. So we'd be playing ourselves basically, because at this point our league does not have immediate plans to play. Also, our league is very strange and is not mostly in our county. And Mr. Shane and I have talked about it, and we are just a little nervous about what that implies. Like schools from all over the region, and some are private and some are public. So in all likelihood, it will be like an intramural thing and not super competitive, but conditioning and training and some competition. Short seasons, but we are hoping to have all the sports between January and June. I don't really understand how that works, but Mr. Shane says it does, so I just trust him. And then special education, our 504 kiddos, our English language learners, our kiddos that just need a little extra. Again, Ms. Nobleza wanted me to be very clear that she doesn't have all the details figured out yet, but just to be clear that students will continue to receive supports both in class and virtually. She gave some examples here, and Dr. Ellis would be upset if I didn't mention that if this is a group of students you're very interested in because maybe your child is one of them, we have our next Inclusive Education Committee meeting on the 18th of this month, and there'll probably be at that point some more information about what special education looks like in hybrid learning. With that, my last thing that I want to do is a little call to action, kind of what I need from you guys, and some of these things I've said already. So the first thing is make your choice. So I would really love to have everyone make their choice by Friday. Otherwise, we're going to start calling you and harassing you. And, Linda is the nicest person in the world, but when she's had to call 50 of you, she's going to start getting grumpy, and we don't want that. We don't want grumpy Linda. So please, please, please fill out your I don't know, survey. I guess survey is the right word, by Friday. If you haven't seen it come through your email already, please check your spam folder. It will come from noreply@natomascharter.org. It will get sent every day until you fill it out, so you might end up with a lot of emails. Support independent learning. So if right now you're noticing that your kiddo is needing a lot of help from you, this is the time to reach out to teachers and get some ideas of how to build their independence. We know that as we make this transition, it will be smoother for our more independent learners. We don't expect them to all be 100% independent, but if you are noticing some things that you're having to help kids with every day, A, thank you for helping them, but B, this is a great time to reach out to their homeroom teacher, reach out to whatever class that might be, so that we can help them build some independence in those areas. Practice safety. We've talked about this, and so this is where I'm going to speak to you as a mom, not just the principal. So I'm a mom of a 4-year-old. When my kids' preschool said, okay, we're going to go back. Do you want your spot or you're going to lose it forever? And we worked hard. It took a long time to get our kid into a preschool. Their kids are going to wear masks every day. I said, you have got to be kidding me. Like this, my 4-year-old is going to wear a mask every day. Right? I was 100% wrong. These 3 and 4-year-olds are awesome. They wear their masks, they wash their hands, they sing songs about washing their hands. Sam is very prepared to make you guys all a video about hand washing. And it's been really inspiring to see what that practice and like positivity around the safety has really done. He can tell you all about the Corona Pirates. Sometimes he remembers it's actually called coronavirus, but and he's very empowered to like keep his grandparents safe and keep himself safe. And I think that I'm not going to take any credit for that. That is his school with positive messaging, but it's also that practicing and helping him feel safe. And so I would really encourage you to help your kids have that same experience. Make choices that are right for your family and right for our community. I am not here to tell anybody how to parent. I'm not here to tell anybody how to make decisions. I'm not here to say, get your flu shot or don't get your flu shot. That is really up to you. But things that help our community are keeping everybody healthy. So limiting family gatherings, play it really smart at the holidays. When in doubt, sit it out. If your kid has the sniffles, keep them home. Let's make sure we limit that. And if flu shots are something that you are comfortable with as a family, I would really encourage everyone to get one this year. It's a big shot. My arm hurt for a while, but we just one less thing to worry about this year. And then last but not least, I've shared the posts for these new openings that we have, distance learning facilitator and subpool on Facebook. We will need substitutes and we will need some good candidates for these distance learning facilitators. Maybe it's one of you. Maybe it's you as a parent who are looking to like do something different. Maybe it's your buddy, maybe it's your cousin, whoever you know. Really, we would really appreciate you sharing those links. So those are my slides. I'm gonna leave it on this important dates and we'll take whatever questions we can. Technically our meeting ends at 6:30, but I can be here as long as you all need me tonight. So I already see one question in the chat and maybe my co-host here, can you also just keep an eye on the chat so I don't miss any? Thank you. So Michelle says, is there room as you open to students being part of both cohorts A and B? Yes, but not yet. So let me get everybody settled in their one cohort first, and then that's a place where we can potentially expand. But it's really going to be for a very limited number who are really, really struggling. I mean, just to be frank, we have students in our community that don't have homes with internet. We have students in our community that don't have a safe place, honestly, to do school, and that's going to be our priority. And beyond that, we'll be meeting other folks' needs. But again, I don't want that to be something that folks plan for because it will be very limited.
Hi, can I ask, you spoke about the distance learning in relation to students that go to campus, but what about those that are distant the whole time? Are they just going to be relegated to recordings?
No, they will still be. So whether you're like on campus versus at home, that at home group will include both the kids that are at home all the time and the kids that are at home that day. So so the idea is that the supports for both of those groups happen together. My words are failing me. So every student will always join their class all together. The whole class will join together for at least part of the conversation. Ugh. I'm gonna take a deep breath and try to get my words back. Every student will join the class, whether at home or at school, regardless of if you're solely distance learning or you're just home that day because it's your off day. Every period for some portion of time. The way that the teachers support the students who are at home will be the same supports, whether you're at home all the time or whether you're at home some of the time. You just might, when I say the flip-flop wouldn't necessarily happen on different days. It happens in different parts of the period, right? So you're still gonna get that same instruction with the other folks who are not at school that day. Does that make sense? I don't think I said it very clearly.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I clarify that a little bit, please? This is
yeah, I mean, so I will do my best to clarify it. I think that I'm going to go back in my slides a little bit.
We choose to be distant learning all the time for the rest of the semester. Is Tanaya then attending the same live instructional that's happening on Monday and Tuesday?
Yes.
So while the live instruction is going on, there is a capability that the people at home, either they are of a different cohort or they are full-time distance learning, will be getting the same instruction.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So that's the plan. The details we're still kind of working out. But like, so if I look at this example from our STEM teachers, right? So if you're at home, you start the class, you log on to Zoom, you find your attendance check-in in Schoology, and you start doing that. Then the students who are at school join you as they come into the room. They're not on Zoom, but they're in the classroom, and the teacher's showing the meeting on the screen. And the teacher does some instruction for everybody, right? The teacher does the introductory math lesson for everybody, whether you're on Zoom or you're in the classroom. And then the kids at home, maybe they're then going to work on their own on the problems, and they would be able to reach out to that distance learning facilitator to get some support via Zoom. And the kids at home are also working on that same set of problems, but they're working on it in the classroom. So that might be one example. Another example might be, okay, you're in English class. Again, the start of class, everybody does a warm up together. Now we're doing like the 20 minutes where the teacher is working with the kids in the room, and the kids on their own are working by themselves. And then the teacher's going to swap. And the teacher's going to say, okay, those of you in the room work by yourselves. Those of you on the computer, I'm going to come over and work with you. It kind of gets at what like Kim asked of, can students still communicate, ask questions during the period while they're in distance learning? Yes, but probably not with the immediacy that they're doing now, right? So right now, the minute you ask a question, you can get an answer. One of the things that we're going to have to work with students on when I talk about building independence is you might not be able to get that answer right that second. You might have to use some resources. And then if those resources aren't, and those resources might be like videos, those resources might be in Schoology. Those resources might be, maybe you have a phone a friend buddy that you can text that we set you up with, or not text, but chat with. Those resources might be the distance learning facilitator. So you might have to wait 5-10 minutes until it kind of is that swap time where the teacher comes back to you. Allison, I think that's Allison because I don't think it's actually Diego, asked, can you talk about the role of the distance learning facilitator? Not really yet. Maybe give me another week and I'll have a little bit more information. The very general description is that this is the person who is supporting, like allowing us to support more students at any given time, right? The teacher is one person. They have a little bit of a limited capacity to be everywhere at once. And so having the distance learning facilitator is our way to sort of support that gap. The details of how that's going to work is something the staff and I are still working out, and actually also as we hire the people, I'm hoping that will become a little bit more obvious. Let's see. Will students be transporting computers to and from school? Yes, we would like students to be bringing their school provided device to school. If you do not have a school provided device, we're going to really encourage you to check one out. If your student really, really wants to use their own personal device, I'm not going to fight that battle, but I'm just going to really encourage you that your $1,500 laptop versus the $250 Chromebook just might make more sense to transport one versus the other. But students will need technology when they're at school. We don't plan for them to be on that technology all the time, but they will need it. I lost my train of thought.
Can I add in something, Ms. Goldman? In working with the IT team and talking with teachers, one thing that we've seen is that there are some students out there that are trying to do everything on their phone. And so that might not be the best solution when they're on campus. And so, it might be that if that's how your student is maybe being successful at home, maybe thinking about checking out a Chromebook so that when they're on campus, they can be able to utilize that resource.
I think that maybe I got to all the questions so far in the chat, but if I didn't, ask me again. Okay, so as we're pondering, there was lots of information there. Again, I'm going to pop the slides in the chat one more time so you can look at them in more detail if you like. I'm just going to say that no, it is not too late to check out a Chromebook. Here, I'm going to put Laura, can you put the URL for Sherpa Desk in the chat? Mrs. Burial is going to put the URL for how to check out a Chromebook in the chat. Will parents be expected to check their child's temperature before school each morning, or will we be checking at school? We will not necessarily be checking every child at school. We do expect parents to check their child's temperature or screen them for symptoms before they come to school. And as always, like when in doubt, sit it out. If you are concerned that your child is ill, they shouldn't be coming to school.
And if I may, we'll be sending home to parents all the information on the expectation of self-screening at home, because we really want to make sure that parents are doing the screening at home.
Okay. So I'm gonna in a moment, actually, I think what I'm going to do in just one moment is I'm going to end our live stream. And so that if you have questions you would like to ask off air, you're able to do that. I lost my mouse. Where'd it go? There it is. Stop screen.